To another episode of 360 Sports. Before we get started today, let's give a special shout out to Penn State Thon, raising over $17 million. And Pat, take it away.
We have a friend, Chooch, here on the channel, Aiden Alco, as you better know him as. He danced for all 46 hours, so I'd like to give a big shout out to him.
Shout out, Chooch. Absolute legend. All right. Well, before we get started, my name is Luke Stefanisco. I'm joined alongside Pat Gray, Chase Brosent, and Brady Welsh. Let's start off talking a little bit about some puck here. Four Nations, I think we consider it an absolute huge success for the NHL. Finished with a Canada win in the final, defeating the United States 3-2 on an overtime goal from Connor McDavid. So, guys, what do you guys think about the event and the game, just, I guess, as a whole from Four Nations?
I thought that was kind of like the best hockey I have ever watched in my life, and I cannot wait for the 2026 Olympics. But I did have a couple issues with the U.S.'s roster construction. I don't know why Chris Kreider and Brock Nelson and Vincent Trocheck were picked over guys like Clayton Keller, Tage Thompson, and even the best American player of all time, Patrick Kane, who's still having a really good year this year. I just had an issue with that, and I hope they do not make that same mistake for 2026, or else it's pretty much going to be the same result.
Yeah, I didn't have anything really to comment roster-wise. I just wanted to say I love the format that the NHL used, and I think that leagues like the NFL and the NBA should adapt to this format, especially the NBA. As we know, in recent years, it's gotten pretty unwatchable, as some would say. But I think the Four Nations tournament, it was a great idea. It meant a lot to the players, and it meant a lot to the fans. There was a lot more competitive gameplay than we see in a normal All-Star game. So, yeah, I definitely think they should do it again next year and just keep moving forward with it.
I was going to say something very similar. I think this might be a little bit of a crazy take. The best idea in sports in the last 20 years. We've seen other sports go through their own transformations, expanding playoffs, especially in the NBA, NFL, which we haven't loved seeing. We see all-star games be nothing at this point. Mm-hmm. I think this gave meaning to hockey. I think this expands its viewership. I'm a hockey fan. Wasn't really keeping track until I saw 3 fights in the first 9 seconds. And then I watched every second of the rest of the tournament. It was fun to watch. It meant something because, it's country versus country. You can get proud about something. I thought it was a fantastic idea. Yeah. It's going to expand hockey's viewership.
Yeah, and like you said, it was a really just great for viewership. I personally don't watch hockey at all. I don't have a favorite team. I'll dabble into it when it comes to playoff time, but I did tune into the Four Nations tournament just because of how anticipated it was, and they really put out a clean product.
I saw statistics. There was 9 million viewers for that final between the USA and Canada, which is really good for a sport like hockey that I think continues to need to grow. And it was a really good final. I just have one question. How do you leave Connor McDavid alone in the slot for a shot like that? That is just an insane thing to do with one of the best players in the world. I understand Austin Matthews, a very good player in his own right, but in that situation, you just can't lack situational awareness like that to just leave one of the best players in the world wide open in the slot.
Yeah, that's still a head scratcher for me. He decided to go double team the guy with the puck and then just leave McDavid wide open right in the slot. Of course he's going to score that. He's the best player in the world.
I think it's moments like those where it's just, such high stakes. You've been playing so hard for the entire game. You get a little tired and your brain just lapses for a moment. It happens in sports all the time. But yeah, it was tough to watch.
Yeah, just an unfortunate moment for that to happen.
And Hollybuck had a really good game other than that. It's not his fault either. That was just an impossible shot to save in a scenario like that.
It's a fantastic tournament.
Yeah, McDavid just is going to bring the heat in a slap shot or wrist shot like that, and you're not going to.
There's nothing you can pretty much do against the greatest player in the world. That's just what it is.
Absolutely zero chance. All right, well, we'll move on. We'll switch over here to football now and talk about the NFL Combine. Shedeur Sanders, Coach Prime's son, announced recently that he will not throw at the NFL Combine for teams. He will just measure out and run his tests. What do you guys think? Does this will affect his draft stock at all? And is this decision smart for Shedeur?
Is it smart for him? Probably. I don't think this affects his draft stock at all, and I think that's the reason why he's doing it. We see this happen. Players year in and year out not go through certain tests at the draft combine or not even show up and participate because they don't want to get injured or they don't want to test to show off certain lack of ability in a certain area. But it's annoying to watch. As a fan, you want to see this happen. You want to see players go through these draft stock parts of the combine so you can see if they're actually able to be a quarterback in the NFL. And it's annoying because I'm not a big Shedeur guy. I don't think his head is in the right place when it comes to a lot of the game of football. So that's where I thought.
Yeah, I think some scouts might see this as like a form of arrogance, but really I don't think it's going to affect his draft stock at all. We've seen what he can do in college. He threw for 37 touchdowns this year and only 10 interceptions, led Colorado to their first bowl game since the COVID season and put up a 9-4 record, pretty good. So I don't think it's going to change his stock at all. The scouts know what they can do. The team that is going to draft him they probably already know. Like they want him. Like if he slides down to the Raiders are going to get him. So I don't think it's going to make his draft stock go down, but it's definitely not going to help it rise. I still think Cam Ward's going to go over him.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think I also agree with you. I think his head isn't in the right place when it comes to football, and that's what worries me. That's because if I were a GM, I would look at that and be like, "Oh, this guy might get me fired if I draft him because he could cause problems in the locker room." I feel like he has his dad's attitude without much of his dad's talent.
And I think he's a very talented quarterback. That Nebraska game stands out to me where he walked off the field with 3 minutes left in the game because they're getting blown out because he played terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Shedeur has parts of his games that I really like. I think he's a good creator with the football in his hand. I think his arm's quick and he gets the ball out with a nice finish. I need to see a little bit more of him in terms of pocket presence, protecting the football, just quick out the ball. He's not a Jalen Hurts where he can scramble out, not Kyler, not Lamar. He needs to take a 3-step drop back and then step up, move the ball quick because he doesn't have that scramble ability. He's a good creator, but in the NFL, you don't have the same time that you do in college.
Well, he didn't have much time in college to begin with. That is the argument a lot of people like to make. His offensive line obviously was not the greatest. There's no defending that O-line for Colorado. But what I really think about is when you watch key games, there are times where he tries to create and he takes key sacks that you just can't afford to have. And that is what kind of skirted Colorado for multiple games this season. And they definitely could have been better in some big moments. And he's had key moments. That Hail Mary against Baylor was amazing. He's had big games. That TCU game from 2 years ago was just a phenomenal showcase of what Colorado could have been. But in big games, he has made key mistakes, which I think kind of sums up what his college.
I haven't seen him play well in a big game. That Nebraska game was huge for them, and they looked he looked terrible. That TCU game may have been a big game, but they lost 16 guys to the draft the year before and graduated like another 10. It was a pretty much whole new team, and they were terrible the rest of the season. Every single big game that Shedeur gets in, he doesn't look like the same player.
Yeah, I think for him to succeed in the NFL, he needs to go to the organization that has a good coach, good O-line, just like a good system fundamentally. We see that like a team, for the Vikings example, they have a great coach, great quarterback room. He's obviously not falling to the Vikings, but if he goes to a team like the Browns, the Titans, they haven't been necessarily great organizations. They don't have the greatest development programs, and I think that could ruin his career.
I don't hate the O-line for the Browns as much. I think he definitely needs a good O-line.
He needs a good coach, too, that can kind of
I'm hearing a lot about the Giants, and I think that's just going to be bad for him. I think it's another bad pick for the Giants.
The Giants have bigger issues, in my opinion, than quarterback at this point. Obviously, you don't have a quarterback set in stone right now, but you need to be able to protect the quarterback before you get one that could actually perform. So I definitely think that this is something to look for in the draft for the Giants to kind of make a decision on, do they want to bank it all on a quarterback and maybe kind of punt it down the road for the full rebuild next season. But it is what it is. We'll stick here with football, but we'll stay on the combine as well. We're going to go around and go to the board and give one player we think is going to rise with his performance at the combine and one player that's going to fall with his performance at the combine. We will start with Chase.
All right. All right, so starting off with my player that's going to rise, it's our very own Penn State's very own Tyler Warren, who recorded over 1,000 yards this season, over 100 catches. And really, I think he's a great player. We all know that. But the NFL scouts might think, oh, he's on a loaded roster. Well, not necessarily with receivers, but he's on a pretty prestigious Penn State roster. He had a good offensive coordinator, a good game plan, and he didn't necessarily play the best competition. So maybe scouts might undervalue him a little bit and say he was just a system tight end. But that's just clearly not true. We saw him be used in many ways this season. I think he rushed for over 200 yards and had a couple of rushing touchdowns. And I think with a good performance of the combine, he'll be able to show the scouts that he's more than just a system tight end, and he can go into any team and make a difference. As for my player that we could see a decrease in stock is Mike Green from Marshall. He had a staggering 17 sacks, I believe, this past season. But to be fair, he wasn't playing the best competition. And recently at the Senior Bowl, he had a video that went viral of him pancaking an offensive lineman. I think that boosted his draft stock a little bit, but I still don't think he's the greatest edge rusher in this draft class. And I think we're going to see that when he goes, he's compared against other players at his position.
I got a question for you when it comes to the tight end. Do you think he goes before pick 14? Because people are signing him at the Colts pick right now. Do you think any team's going to take him before that?
I mean, honestly, I think the Colts is a good fit for him. I think he should be a better pick. I think he should go maybe like 12 or something. But the teams at that position, they don't really need a tight end as much as the Colts need a tight end. They kind of need a receiver room. They need anyone that can catch a ball. But I think the need for the top 10 teams, they need quarterbacks, receivers, linemen. There's just not really a need for him.
All right. Pat, go ahead.
All right. For my two different prospects that I think are going to rise and fall during this draft prospect, the first one is Omarion Hampton. We've heard Ashton Jeanty, a little bit of Cam Skattebo for the past 4 months. And I get it. They're fantastic players. Maybe not Cam Skattebo as much. Omarion Hampton is maybe even better than Ashton Jeanty. We've seen him do so much at UNC, playing much better teams than Ashton Jeanty has. I know it's a crazy take. I still think Ashton Jeanty is the prize of this draft. But Omarion Hampton's going to be a great player. He does everything well. He's a tough back. He's a 3-down back. He's a great pass blocker. The only issue with him that I haven't seen so much is breakaway speed. He had 2 50-yard breakaways this entire season and got chased down a bunch. But if he works on that speed during this offseason a little bit, has a great 40 time, maybe in the high 4.4s, I think he's really going to rise up and come from like a second rounder to maybe a late first rounder, maybe an early second rounder. The guy I think that's going to fall off a lot is the people that had a lot of stock going into the season, James Pierce Jr. Everybody said he was going to be the first, second, third pick maybe in this entire draft. I wasn't a fan of the guy from the get-go. I thought he was a bad run defender, and I still think he's a bad run defender. Yes, he has a 20% pass rush, but he's a 240-pound guy. He's probably going to run a fast 40. To be a great D-end in the NFL, you need to be in that 250 range, and that's going to drop off his speed a whole bunch. So if he works his way up to 250 and has a bad 40, he's going to slide. If he's at 240 and has a good 40, he's still going to slide down the draft board, and he's like a mid-second day pick.
I like Hampton. I think this running back draft class is just so loaded that running back needy teams really don't need to waste a pick, first round at this point, like, especially with the Cowboys. I think you don't have to go Ashton Jeanty in the first round. I think you can take a more prevalent need and then go Hampton in the second round if he's still there.
I think it's those two guys, and they've separated from the bunch. I like DJ Gibbons from K-State. I think there are other good running backs, but I think those two guys have surpassed all the rest of them. I see both of the same traits in the same guy. I see a little bit better receiving threat of Omarion Hampton than I have Ashton Jeanty, maybe because they just didn't need to use it out of him. And obviously, Ashton Jeanty's far beyond the better player, but I think we should look at it a little closer.
I absolutely agree. All right, Brady, what have you got for us?
All right. So for my riser, I have Arian Smith, wide receiver from Georgia. He's right now projected to be a late second rounder, but his speed is absolutely unreal. And some scouts are saying he could potentially break Xavier Worthy's 40-yard dash, which would be exciting to see. And if I'm a team, he averaged 17 yards per catch. And if I'm a team that needs a deep threat, like say the Ravens, they have a big armed QB in Lamar Jackson, and they definitely need a deep threat alongside Zay Flowers, I would definitely consider maybe picking Arian Smith in late in the first round or in the second. My faller, though, is Kelvin Banks Jr., offensive tackle from Texas. Excuse me. I don't think he's going to have a necessarily terrible combine, but I think he's just going to be a project because the pass blocking isn't quite there yet. I think the combine is just going to drop his draft stock since he is currently the top offensive tackle on the board. I think the combine is just going to show that guys like Josh Simmons and Will Campbell are a little bit better options at offensive tackle than Kelvin Banks.
The Georgia receivers didn't have that good of performance in the playoffs, so I'm curious to think how much will that affect, the stock of those guys.
Yeah.
Arian Smith to me he looked good against teams that they were blowing out. Again in the SEC championship against Notre Dame, against good cornerbacks, he wasn't able to get separation against those guys. So he scares me a little bit, but he is quick.
Yeah.
Teams will take a flyer on him, absolutely. I really do think that they will. All right, let's get going here. All right, so to start off with my riser, I'm going to have to go with Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green. Now, this guy, again, wasn't as highly showcased as many other tight ends in the country, Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren. But what he did on the MAC was very impressive, over 1,400 receiving yards, basically playing kind of a wide receiver type of role, but he was also a very solid blocker for Bowling Green as well. Now, the thing with him is he has very, very, very good speed for a tight end. And I think his measurables will be very solid compared to the tight ends. So I could see him rising from a second-round pick to maybe being in that late first round, maybe a Kansas City Chiefs pick or an Eagles, because both those teams kind of have tight ends that are either on a contract year or aging that you might need to find and replace down the line. But I could definitely see Harold Fannin rising up into that first round. And my faller will have to be Kobe King from Penn State. Now, I've watched Kobe King a lot. I do think his decision to declare for the draft was a bit rash and a bit fast. I think one more year in college would have seen him a lot more refined and a better player. But the problem with Kobe King is his athleticism this season has failed him multiple times. I mean, I've seen in the Notre Dame game where he tried to cover a running back on the outside and got absolutely burned, giving up a big play. Now, again, that could be the scheme setting him up for failure there. But his athleticism has struggled at times. And I do think with some rough showings and measurables at the combine, I could see him sliding down to the late 6th, 7th round, maybe even undrafted in this draft class.
Harold Fanning still gives me PTSD. That game that he had against Penn State was so. I remember watching it in the stands, being like, "Who is this guy?" It was like 5-yard dink every single time. You get 20 yards,
15 yards. It's impressive, and that's what I think he's so good at. Again, like the blocking grade, he might have been a better blocker than Tyler Warren, but he is serviceable and he's an incredible receiving threat, which is why I think a guy like him could sneak into that first round to a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, where Travis Kelce had that kind of success with that dink and dunk type plays.
Yeah, and that'd be dangerous if he slid to the Kansas City Chiefs.
I think it's a matter of if he slides there or if they choose to take him there at that 31st pick, which it's anyone's ball game at that point, anyone's choice.
Yeah, definitely possible.
I can see
take him there.
All right, we'll move off of the NFL and now move into the NBA, and we're going to talk about our hot takes as the season begins to kind of push to a close. I want you guys to give either a team that you need to make a change or do something, or award winners, anything from the NBA. Let's see what we chose.
So just purely looking at the record book, you might not think this is a hot take, but the Oklahoma City Thunder are considered a very young team. Their oldest player might not even be over the age of 30, but they do have Isaiah Hartenstein now and Chet Holmgren playing at the same time alongside MVP frontrunner Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So I think they're a serious threat, and the only team that I think that could beat them come playoff time is the Denver Nuggets out of the Western Conference. I think other than the Nuggets, they can run the table in the West. I think they have the advantage on the Lakers, the Warriors, the Grizzlies, all those teams. The only team that really gives them threats other than the Nuggets are the Timberwolves, but they also have lost some key players. So many argue that their lack of experience will haunt them, but I think they're the best team in the West. The only team that can beat them is the Nuggets because they have Jokic and Murray. Jokic, 2-time NBA MVP and NBA champion. So I think they're the only team that can give them fits.
I think it's a very sensible pick. I mean, the team has experience. OKC doesn't. I still think OKC is a year away from being able to make that title one when they win it. And I think Denver's offense when Jokic is on the floor is possibly the best that we have ever seen. Yeah. Maybe the 96 Bulls, maybe 16 Warriors. And that's I completely agree with you.
I think it's crazy how much that a lot of the heat the OKC management took for making those trades a while back to get those like 2026 first rounders or 2023 first rounders.
They still have picks from it.
They still have picks. And it's insane because they've built a really good team and they still have a huge future because of those picks. It was a bold move, I think, at the time, and it's really paid off dividends, which is crazy to think about. Pat, I believe you're next.
Yeah, I mean, the pot's going to get even hotter here. This is a crazy hot take. We got playoffs are going to be boring again. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. NBA basketball is boring at this point. I wish I didn't have to be the one to say that. It was my first love when it came to sports, but it's boring. Let's be honest. And every playoffs, especially championships since the COVID season, maybe the year after, have been boring because we don't have superstars. We don't have high stakes. We don't have a bad guy in these playoffs like we used to. It just seems like we're getting the same championship year in and year out. We get one guy who's like right below star level, like last year, Tatum, and you go against Luka, who's a superstar. You just don't have two MVP face of the league kind of guys like we had during the 2010s. We had Dirk, we had LeBron, you had Timmy D versus LeBron, you got Steph and LeBron. You got these guys year in and year out who are faces of the league, who are top of the league. In the 2020s, we don't have that, and I don't think we're going to get that again this year. No offense to Tatum, I don't think he's a superstar. I don't think he's a face of the league. He's not that guy who's going to drive dollars up in the league. And it just year in and year out, that's who we get in the title game, and it's just boring.
It does. I agree with you with that point. It has been boring, a lot more boring compared to 2016 through 2019 with the Cavs and the Warriors and even the Raptors. when they won their title. That was an exciting playoff series. I just feel like in recent years, whether it's the Lakers COVID season, the Celtics, the Warriors, there hasn't been that much excitement in the playoffs. It's not the same vibe in the finals. We haven't, like you said, there's not a bad guy, there's not a superstar in it. So yeah, it's going to be it's a lot more boring than it was come like 2016.
Like, tell me, when was the last NBA playoff series which you guys watched and you're like, this is a fantastic series? Because I haven't seen one in a while.
I'd have to say probably the Suns and Clippers. I think it was 2021. That was a good series. Other than that, I can't remember. I can't think of one.
Because there really isn't one. There's no one where we're like super excited to watch the next game because we kind of know what's happening.
Well, I think that's what NBA basketball has become. But Brady, take it away.
I got now. Jason Tatum might not be the face of the league right now, but I do have his team repeating, going back-to-back champs. They're scorching hot right now, currently on a 5-game winning streak. They've won 12 of 15, getting hot at the right time. And they haven't lost back-to-back games in 2025 yet. Their last back-to-back losses were December 23rd and 25th. The Cavs and Thunder, I think, are their biggest challenges, but the Thunder's youth does worry me, and so does the Cavs' lack of championship experience. They only have 2 guys with rings, and they're not really their star players.
This scares me. When we got asked this question today about, what's your hot take, and I thought of boring, this is the first thing I thought of. The Celtics are so boring. I can't stand watching this team play basketball because it's just not fun. They don't do anything fun.
They win, though.
The table's pretty divided on the anomaly here.
It's like the Patriots. They're just not a fun team to watch.
Might just be Boston.
What I would do to be a Boston sports fan,
I would do nothing because they're not fun to watch.
You win championships, though.
It's not the same.
I think it's just a lot of fatigue. You see the Patriots fan base kind of had that championship fatigue later in their Brady's run. If a team goes on a dominant run, championship fatigue does set in, especially like you saw with Kansas City this year after the Super Bowl. They weren't in the right mindset. Even happens to teams. But move on to mine. I think it's time for it's time for them to tank. Joel Embiid is potentially out for the season yet again. I don't understand why you choose to stick with him at this point for the Philadelphia 76ers. Nick Nurse has kind of let you down in that coaching role. It seems like he's checked out. Feels like part of the team has checked out. You have found some guys. You have Justin Edwards. You have Gershon Yabusele. I mean, you have some guys that could be potential good role players down the line. Obviously, Tyrese Maxey. You could probably roll with him as your star. But I think it's time that you need to admit that Joel Embiid might not be your guy for the future and try to move him to get something. Also, including Paul George probably into that because I don't know why we made that move in the first place. I think Podcast P has probably said more stuff on a podcast and he's scored more buckets for the Sixers this year. But truth be told, I think it's time for the Sixers to tank it. Maybe you get lucky in the lottery, get a semi-high pick, you get a good player out of college, but I don't know. That's just something I think Sixers need to consider, and they need to make something because this team is headed in the wrong direction fast.
Checked out. We're bags packed in the van, hour down 76. We're terrible. This team is it's so frustrating to watch. I watched the game the other night, and Nick Claxton of the Brooklyn Nets, when no one else was playing on that team, hit a game winner on us. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I never thought that Paul George was a great signing in general. I do think his age is starting to show. He hasn't really been the same since his first season with the Clippers and during his years with the Pacers and OKC. Obviously, he was a phenomenal player, but he's not the same as he used to be. Embiid can't seem to stay on the court. When he is on the court, he's pretty good. We've seen that, but it might be time, like you said, build around Maxey. I think he's the brightest star on that roster. He wants to be there, and the rookie that you guys just got, McCain. So I think if you build around those two and just add some depth, maybe add another big man. I mean, if you guys got really lucky, add Cooper Flagg. I mean, you need a lot of luck to get there. But yeah, the Sixers, I think it's time for them to tank and go full rebuild like they did a couple years ago.
So I got a question for you. Do you think that we keep McCain and Maxey and go the small ball route? Because they're two very small guards to have on the court together.
I think if you do, you have to get a free agency signing, a big. I don't know what free agents are going to be next year, or just continue to get bigs in the draft.
So we got to get rid of Embiid, take those two guys, hope that somebody falls to us in the draft. Free agency.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Embiid's a great player. Obviously he's very talented, but if he can't stay on the court, what good is it for you? And it's only wasting money.
No, I agree.
The best availability for him is availability. I don't know how I butchered that.
Yeah, I was going to say
he just hasn't been available for the Sixers. That's been point blank what it is. No other way to sugarcoat it.
I think they're having conversations at this point with him. I've heard reports that they are or not. I don't know, but they got to be having conversations with the guy. Like, I don't know what your future here is with this team because he's not there. It doesn't even seem like he wants to play. It doesn't seem like he wants to get back on the court.
I agree.
But what are you going to get for him at this point?
Yeah, and I mean, if the Mavs could trade Luka, Sixers can definitely trade Embiid.
Yeah, but I don't think we're going to get anything close to what they got for Luka.
All right, well, moving on now, we're going to be challenged here. 2 players from different video games, and we're going to have to guess which player has the higher overall rating. Let's see our first 2.
Melo Ball. Okay.
I think Drew Aller's last
He's
rating
like
was
a
93.
90. Wow. All right.
think he
I
was
don't think
95.
Lamelo's quite there.
I think he was up to 93, and they didn't update after the playoffs.
I could see LaMelo being like a high 80, but I don't think he.
I do think it's
90.
Drew.
I think it's got to be Drew.
I'll go with Drew, but I remember at the start of the game he was not a 93.
I think he was 83 or
Yeah,
85.
he was pretty low when they started the game. So I don't know when they took this at, because he was pretty low back then.
91.
Oh, he's a 90. Okay.
That makes sense. I mean, it's different sports, and college football is a lot different than the NBA.
He's going to be much higher next season. I can
hopefully.
guarantee that.
Soto and Sauce Gardner.
Soto, right?
I don't know. I don't think the Jets. I don't think Madden ever dropped Sauce Gardner from a 97. And
He should not be a 97.
MLB The Show is like very particular with their ratings. Very
they
few
don't
guys
give
are in a
anybody
99.
Super high ratings.
So Soto might be a 95.
What's the highest rating in MLB? Do you guys know?
I think Otani's like a 98.
Yeah, I think that's the
Okay.
highest they give out.
Soto might be a 95.
Sauce, but I feel like they should have dropped him this season. He wasn't the same player that he
I
used
feel
to
like
be.
MLB The Show just lowballs players all the time.
I think it should be Soto, but
I like that though. I like not having a bunch of guys at 99. It kind of bothers me.
Yeah, I agree with that.
94,
Oh my-
91.
Wow, I
We're talking about
lowballed Soto.
91.
Wow.
I
Highest
gave
played
Juan Soto.
player in
That's
MLB
fine.
history.
He's kind of mid. I'm gonna be honest with you.
All right, next 2.
LeBron.
LeBron, Austin Matthews.
What's
It's gotta be
LeBron?
Austin
Like a
Matthews.
96,
And
97?
he's not a 98 anymore. They lowered him down.
I think he's around the 96 mark. And
I was
Austin
just
Matthews
playing
has to be high.
95. He was 95.
He was
I
95.
believe he's a 95. I just checked today on NHL 25.
I'm gonna go Austin Matthews.
I think it's
I think it's LeBron.
I think it's
LeBron.
You can't bet against LeBron.
And 2K, they're pretty generous with their
They're so
Yeah.
generous,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to LeBron.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go LeBron.
96, 95. All right.
Good thing I remembered that because I think I would have probably said Austin Matthews if I didn't remember. I just checked today. That was pure luck. All right, moving on to our final segment. We're just going to go around the table and talk about really anything we want to. I guess I'll just kind of throw out a topic here to start and talk UFC here. Ilia Topuria vacating his lightweight title to move up and potentially take on Islam Makhachev for the UFC lightweight title. That could be an insane matchup. I know, Pat, we had a little discussion before the show.
I think we were going to talk about the exact same thing. Yeah, possibly, but I think it's pretty much etched in stone now that they're going to fight. You don't abandon your title for no reason. I like that they made him drop his title. Not that he's going to go to double champ, but I don't think he earned that yet. I think it's a bad match for Ilia. I keep betting against Ilia. This time, I think I'm going to be right. And I'm not a fan of either of these two guys, but I think Islam's just too much for him. I think he's too small of a guy for Islam.
I don't know if I agree with that, though. I think that, it depends on how fast Ilia Topuria pushes the pace. If he's able to get, in the boxing range of Islam and kind of just punch him consistently for the first 3 rounds, he might be able to put Islam out. And we also did the same thing. We said that Max Holloway would be the better boxer and he'd win that fight on the feet, and Max Holloway lost that fight on the feet. Ilia just pushed the pressure and just absolutely clobbered him in that round 4 and won that fight. And now, again, as the longer the fight goes, I think it does lean more towards Islam because that 4th, 5th round, Islam's proven to be dangerous. When he has you tired, he gets you on the ground and can end the fight in an instant with a submission.
I agree with you. We haven't seen anybody pressure Ilia yet with their foot on the pedal, which I think is going to be a big test for him. We see in certain moments, he backs up. He gets a little scared. We saw it against Volk. We saw it against Max in certain moments. Now, yeah, the power of Ilia is always going to be a problem for anybody that he's fighting, and that happened in the Volk and Max fights. But when you're going up 10 pounds against a guy who is much bigger than you, and Islam's not a small 155er, I think that pressure that Islam's going to put on, when he's constantly looking for a shot, constantly, and even if you get him once, is that power still going to be the same at that weight class? I don't know.
We'll end that there. Chase, what do you have for us?
All right. So with 1 week remaining in the college hockey regular season, Penn State's arguably one of the hottest teams in hockey. They used to be number one ranked Michigan State on the road. They really turned their season around. In the middle of the season, they were kind of sub 500. They weren't doing great, but they've really turned it around. They beat big teams like Ohio State, Minnesota, or they're playing Minnesota this week. Obviously, Michigan State, Notre Dame, and I'm liking what I'm seeing out of the team right now. They're they're scoring a lot of goals. They're playing really good defense too. I think they held Michigan State to two or three goals both games this weekend. So I like what I see from them, and I think they can make a run come Frozen Four time.
How about Aiden Fink? I mean, he's a Hobie Baker Award contender, leading the nation in points. It's amazing to watch him play. And I mean, I hope that Penn State gets it done. I want to see them make a run in the playoffs because they've been dangerous. I mean, this is just a shocker. There was a point in the season where you'd see on social media everyone's selling their hockey tickets, and I'm like, this team's not dead yet. I mean, they're having a rough stretch of the season, but they weren't totally dead. There was a lot of good signs, and you kind of saw that turnaround against Notre Dame at the Frozen Series in Wrigley. Yeah. You kind of saw that turnaround. Eventually, now they found it when they beat Michigan State in that shootout at Penn State. And now they went on the road, beat Michigan State in a shootout, and then beat them in regulation, which was a huge win for the pairwise standings. And I mean, now they're situated to maybe potentially host the Frozen Four game. That is very dependent on how they perform this weekend. But I think they could definitely do it, and I'm very happy to see how they've turned it around. Huge shout out to Guy Gadowski and the team there. Brady, what do you got for us?
So Penn State basketball, they've been tanking, but they have won 2 in a row. Do you think they can possibly make the Big Ten tournament?
No, I'm sorry, they're done.
Yeah,
I want to give it to them, but they haven't looked good against the teams they need to look good against, and they don't have the benefit of the doubt anymore. They have to do well in the Big Ten tournament, and I just don't see it happening for them.
They haven't matched up very well against Big Ten teams in general. I mean, ever since like December, January, they were playing like teams, non-conference teams. They looked really good. Well, against the teams that they won against, they had a good record to show for them. But ever since they started conference play, they just haven't looked great. They haven't matched up against anybody. I don't know what the longest losing streak they were on. It felt like an eternity. It felt like 20 games in a row. But yeah, I think you're right. They just need to hang up the cleats till next season.
It's just a shame, too, because there was so much talent on that roster. I mean, you had Ace Ball, one of the best defensive players in the nation. You had Yannick Niederhauser, who was an excellent big man for Penn State standards, like kind of the first true big man that Penn State's had in a very long time. You had Puff Johnson, a solid 3. And then, I mean, just a very solid and young squad. Mike Rhodes has brought in some good recruits. He has Caden Mingo coming in next season, but it's just a shame. There was so much talent. The win over Purdue kind of had everybody all eyes on Penn State, and they've struggled ever since. It's been a shame.
Yeah.
I guess because we went with UFC Furious, I'll change mine up a little bit. And we all talked about Penn State sports. Let's talk about Penn State wrestling for a second. They're still having one of the most phenomenal seasons I've ever seen. It comes in and year out where this team is the best in the nation by far. They destroyed number 2 Iowa. And I think we're ready to start having the conversation. Is Cael Sanderson the best wrestling coach of all time? Now, obviously, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. The guy from Iowa State is probably everyone's number 1 overall pick. But the one guy that worries me a little bit is Carter Starachi. He hasn't looked like the same wrestler this year. He's only winning matches by 2 or 3 points. He's only getting up to like the 6-point mark, which is last year we were seeing him tech fall guys by 15 points. But I'm still excited to see what we do, especially with the Big Ten tournament coming up in 2 weeks.
Well, I have to mention one of Starachi's closest matches, Angelo Ferrari. Angelo Ferrari did just beat Dustin Plott, the number 3 wrestler at Oklahoma State last night.
I know how good Angelo Ferrari is. He was the number 1 ranked, and his brother. Have you seen his brother?
Yes.
Whew. He's a ridiculous wrestler, and I know that. But then, what was it? The week after Ohio State, it was another unranked guy, and only beat him by 3 points. I need more for the guy that's supposed to be the best wrestler
going
in the
for a 5-time national championship.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have, unfortunately, here on 360 Sports. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure to tune in tomorrow for the hockey show. For myself, Pat Gray, Chase Brosen, and Brady Welsh. Thanks again. Thanks for tuning in to 360 Sports.